Hey, I'm Chris from Make Everything, and today we're going to talk about the process of making these two huge brass rings. So this isn't a typical how-to video. I'm going to go through the process that I took to build these, but really I wanted to make this video because when I was looking for information to make this project, I couldn't find much. The material that I used is 2-inch by 1-inch with a .100 wall. This is architectural bronze, but it looks just like brass. The place where I bought this material told me that I wouldn't be able to make these rings. And the place where I bought the dies for this said, try this out. If it works, send me pictures because I will be shocked. I want to thank Swag Offroad. I'll put a link in the description for all their help. The guy from Swag spent probably close to an hour on the phone with me trying to figure out how I was going to roll this material. I had to make 60-inch diameter circles out of this material, and then they needed to have 4 seams so that they can be taken apart and put back together. So me and the guy from Swag Offroad, I can't remember his name, but I will put it in this video right here. We talked about it, whether I would use Delrin or steel, and afterwards, I said, forget it, maybe this isn't going to work. And I slept on it, woke up and said, you know what, let's give it a shot. So the client that I built these for quoted it with multiple other fabricators, big shops, and I'm the only person that said they would do it. So I love projects like this. I love projects that everybody else says no to. I love to push myself and just try and figure out how things are going to work. So I hope you enjoy this video and you'll be able to see the hurdles that I overcame with this and the little tricks that I learned I hope can help someone else with a similar problem in the future. So check it out.
The material that I'm using is 16 feet long from the manufacturer, and to roll it I'm going to be using this Harbor Freight tubing roller that's upgraded with basically the Swag Offroad full upgrade kit. So those are Swag dies, they're 2 inches wide, and then I have the bottle jack extension, and then that's a Harbor Freight pipe threader that drives the whole system. So I started off with this trying to use the pipe bender on the stand that I normally use it on, and normally what I'll do is I'll clamp it to my table, and that'll just keep the leverage from whatever material I'm rolling from moving the bender. So starting out with this project, I did do a couple of tests, and what I found was that I needed to use a sacrificial piece of material in between the drive roller and the brass, and that helped sort of even out the bend and force the brass into a uniform cup, which you saw on the picture of the material that I showed earlier, how the material is going to concave in on the inside of the curve and it's going to blow out on the side. So at this point, this is all an experiment in this project, so I'm just chucking everything up. And my original attempt, I thought I could keep the aluminum from moving around by putting some clamps on the ends, but I quickly realized that that wasn't going to work. The aluminum was really difficult to work with during this entire project. I bought 4 16-foot lengths, one for each 16-foot length of brass, and I thought that the aluminum was going to be manageable as it was rolled, but what kept happening was the aluminum was rolling really quickly and the brass obviously wasn't, so I had to wrestle with the aluminum almost the entire time on all 4 pieces. And since the aluminum is so soft, it would occasionally get jammed up like it is right here, and I'd have to cut it out or smash it out with a hammer. But once the brass bent to a certain point, it was all right for me to take the aluminum out. And the first problem that I came to on this project you're about to see, which is that my ceiling wasn't high enough to properly roll this material. So I thought about it, and eventually what I did was I laid out the circle, which I'm doing here, and I take a string and I figure out how long a half circle at a 60-inch diameter is, and I was trying to figure out if I could cut the brass so that I would be able to do it without hitting my ceiling. And what I discovered was that I really just needed to use the whole piece of material. So at this point, I was kind of panicking, but you can't panic, you have to find a solution. So what I decided was that I would take the roller off the stand and bolt it to the floor. That would give me the maximum ceiling height that I needed. I could have done this project outside, but I was doing it mostly at night, and I really didn't want to bother the neighbors. So here I'm taking 3/8 drop-in anchors and just putting them in the floor and making it work.
When shit doesn't look like it's working, you improvise.
Now at this point, it's just a matter of putting everything back.
Okay. At this point, I've bolted this to the floor because I need the ceiling height. This is going to get me probably 4 extra feet. I hope that's enough. Let's find out.
So now with the tubing roller bolted to the floor, I can try and complete this first half circle. Right away, I noticed that this gave me exactly how much ceiling height I needed. You'll see a big flat spot in this one is because I was attempting to do it, obviously, while it was still on the stand. And once I put it on the floor, the other ones that I rolled, I didn't have that problem. One of the things I always like to have when I'm rolling something on the tubing roller is a template that shows the curve I'm looking for. So this is just some scrap 3/4 inch plywood, and I'm taking a jigsaw here and just cutting a rough cut of what a 60-inch diameter looks like. And you'll see me use this and just hold it up against the inside of the curve as I'm rolling this to help me know when to stop. It's very easy to go too far with a tubing roller, and with material this big, I really didn't want to have that happen. So I was pretty careful to make sure that if anything, my curve was too large as opposed to too small. So it's just checking and adjusting until I get the right curve and pull it out of the roller.
Okay, so the first portion is rolled. It actually worked. I kind of can't believe it, but I'm not upset. So I had to bolt this guy to the floor in order to have the height without hitting the ceiling of my shop. And I cut this template out of plywood, and that gives me the inside bend. So this is 60-inch diameter on this, which is a 30-inch radius. And now you can see what happened to the pipe. And I'm going to show a cross section of this once I cut some off, but this, put something flat against it. See how it bellied in like that? The metal needs somewhere to go. So the sides actually cambered out and the middle bellied in. So this is the information that I was trying to find on the internet, but instead I took a huge risk on a job, and knock on wood, it looks like this one is going to work. Now I just got to roll 3 more of these rings so that I can make 2 complete circles, each with 4 seams. Wish me luck.
So I'm not going to show the whole rest of the process of rolling all 4 of these, but it's pretty much more the same, fighting with the aluminum, making sure that the bend was correct, trying not to overbend it, and also trying not to warp the material. So this one I started off without the aluminum, and I wound up adding it a little bit later. And immediately you can see how the aluminum just curls up. I think the most difficult part about rolling these was using the sacrificial aluminum, but it definitely made a difference and made the interior of the rings have a better quality than if I would have avoided the aluminum altogether and just ran it. So let's skip ahead to when all 4 of these were complete. So now I've got 4 pretty much complete circles, but unfortunately the material wasn't long enough to do it in one pass, and since the client wanted 4 seams anyway, it wasn't a big deal. Having a big layout table like this is so important when you're doing work at this scale. Not feeling like you're cramped in a small shop is really a great feeling. So I'm trying to see where the 2 circles become concentric into each other. So they're slightly different in their bend. So I use these 2 big clamps, and right now I can just see that they are a complete circle. So I'm marking a half on both of them so that I can make 2 equal sides. And then I'm going to use my portaband for pretty much this entire project to cut this material. There's a lot of cleanup with these cuts to make them square.
God damn it.
This set me back, but having a bandsaw blade welder in the shop makes it so that you're never held down for long. A new blade in the bandsaw, and we're back up and running. So I'm cutting all these pretty rough with the little portaband, and I'm just marking everything and running the line. I'm going to have to fine-tune every single one of these seams, so it's not a huge deal for me to cut them sort of broad and then just hit them with the grinder and a file to make them perfect. So I just joined the 2 first seams, and now it's time to make this junction fully functional. And the way I'm going to do that is with some solid brass and some brass 1/4-20 machine screws. I have a little dust collector set up underneath this just to keep some of the latent brass particles out of the air. And I'm just cleaning things up with a file here to make the joint that much better. I actually am resawing this solid brass material. This is 1 3/4 by 3/4 inch solid brass that I got from onlinemetals.com, and this will act as the junction between the 2 materials. I'm specifically using brass because I want it so that if you happen to see anything through that gap, you don't see a dissimilar metal and really notice the seam anymore. I developed a measurement that would give me equal spacing for the 2 screws that I put in every junction on either side. And I mark them on a piece of paper, and I use a caliper to make sure that they're in the same space. And here I'm drilling those out with a number 7 and then tapping them with a 1/4-20 tap. At this point, it's a lot of drilling, tapping, countersinking, and I'm using the air compressor to clear the chips in between each process so that I don't get anything bound up. And you can see the 2 different colors just of these 2 separate pieces of brass. But once everything's scotch brighted, it all blends really well. And the little trick with the tape flag just keeps you from drilling too deep. What's nice about working with brass is that you can use a power drill with your taps and you don't have to worry about breaking anything. But I'm very careful to clear the chips because I don't want these brass machine screws to get bound up and snap. Now that one seam's down, I go to the other side of the ring and I want to close that seam up as well. You can see how there's this deflection in the brass, and I have to be particularly careful in reshaping each of these seams so that when they're closed, they look good. I'm using the flap wheel on the grinder and just sort of hand tuning everything and making it a nice tight seam. And I measure the inside of the brass each time I resaw one of these brass stocks because I just want to make sure that it's a nice tight fit. I'm going for a stationary side and a active side with these joints. So when I was done with this project, I pretty much told the client that the screws on the left side of the seam were to remain in when they disassemble them, and the screws on the right side of the seam were to be taken out for packing and shipping and then reassembly. I like doing it this way because it makes it so that it's repeatable and reliable when they take this thing apart and put it back together. I keep everything clamped nice and tight when I do my drilling, tapping, and countersinking so that the seam is reliable. So when I'm done putting these two screws in, I have a complete circle. And the joints were really nice on this. It pained me to have to add two more. It was to the client's request that each one of these had 4 seams because it has to be flat packed and shipped across the country. So now that I have a complete circle, I spin it 90 degrees and I basically cut it to add an intentional seam. There was a little bit of twist in the material, and you can sort of see it right as I break through, which was a little frustrating because then I had to do so much cleaning up and I had to basically rework these two pieces so that the joint would look right. It would have been really nice to leave these as a 60-inch ring with 2 seams, but again, you have to do what the client asks. And more of the same. Drill with a number 7, tap with a 1/4-20, and then use a nice big countersink to get those 1/4-20 brass screws nice and flush with the top. I'm using a single point countersink that I got from McMaster. It leaves a really nice, clean countersink in a soft material like brass. I found that the multi-point, like a 4-point, they kind of leave a chatter, and the single point works great. Drilling straight down in material like this is something that I think just comes with experience. Making sure you don't blow out the side of your material is definitely nerve-wracking when you're working on a project like this. I had no extra material on this project. I had the option to purchase more from the metal supplier at the same quantity price, but I figured I would wait and see if something went wrong before I chose to go down that route. So I'm going to spare you the drilling of the other two and the construction of the other two, and I'm going to skip right to the finishing. This is a Porter Cable Restorer. It's a great metal finishing tool, and that's a red, they call it medium, Scotch-Brite pad for refinishing. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to get all the surface scratches and really make the whole surface a uniform finish. This wasn't necessarily required by the client, but my roller did do a certain amount of damage to the sidewalls, and I really didn't want, to give them an inferior product. One of the things I'm doing here is I'm just adding a letter punch on each seam. So A goes to A, B goes to B, C goes to C, D goes to D, etc. And now it's time to just finish off all the surfaces on this. Again, I'm using the Porter Cable Restorer, and I'm starting with a 120 grit sandpaper, and I'm just getting all the surface scratches down. I'm really trying to make sure that I don't leave any large imperfections and give the client something that they can do light finishing to, and they can work with easily. So the 120 grit gets all the scratches out, and then I switch to a red Scotch-Brite pad, the fine, and I give it a totally uniform look throughout. It's a big shop, but it's still a little difficult to work with material this large. So standing the 60-inch ring up on its side and just trying to get everything to look nice and uniform. At this point, the other ring was already finished, and now this one is done, and everything's looking smooth. All the seams are looking smooth. And this was a really difficult project, but it came out really nice. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. Please like and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Again, I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything, and we'll see you on the next one.